Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're bringing you a story full of emotion, tension, and mystery. It all begins when Diem, after days of searching, finally meets her lover, CEO Toan, in a bustling marketplace. However, what shocks her is the drastic change in Toan. He no longer remembers their love, and it seems that all his memories of her have disappeared. Despite the pain and disappointment, Diem refuses to give up. She can't abandon Toan, the man she deeply loves. After their emotional encounter in the market, Diem decides to follow Toan back to his home, where he lives with an elderly woman. Will Diem be able to help Toan regain his memories? Or will he forever remain distant and unfamiliar to her? Stay tuned for this thrilling story, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any exciting developments in CEO Toan's journey to reclaim his memories. The truth will be revealed, and you'll be the first to witness it. Diem walked down the crowded streets, holding a fabric bag in her hand, her eyes scanning around without really paying attention to what was going on. A whole week had passed, and she still couldn't find any clues about Toan, the man she loved so deeply. The endless searches, the unanswered calls, and the silence that surrounded her made her feel powerless. Each step she took felt heavier, as if all hope was slowly fading away. The busy marketplace today was as crowded as usual. Laughter and conversation filled the air, merchants haggling and people calling out their goods. Diem stopped at a fruit stall, her eyes pausing on the ripe red watermelons. Suddenly, a soft breeze swept by, making her hair flutter. In that moment, she felt like something strange was happening, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. There was a familiar presence, but when she turned around, everything was still just a whirlwind of activity around her. Diem turned to continue walking, but then she stopped dead in her tracks. Not far away, a man stood near a vegetable stall, looking at a bunch of greens with a confused expression. The sunlight from the late afternoon shone on his face, and for a moment, Diem felt her heart tighten. She couldn't believe her eyes. It was Toan. But was it really him? Toan stood there, his hair dusty, dressed in simple clothes, not the man she had once known and loved. He looked unfamiliar. His eyes no longer held the determined and confident spark they once had. Diem stepped closer, but then stopped again. She could feel the difference. It was too much of a change from the man she remembered. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but couldn't. She took another step toward him. Her voice choked. "Toan, is it really you? Do you remember me?" The question hung in the air, but Toan only turned to look at her, his gaze distant, showing no recognition. Toan looked at her for a moment, his eyes full of confusion and uncertainty. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice void of any familiarity. Diem froze, her heart breaking. She couldn't believe that the man she loved, the one she had been searching for all this time now, looked at her with such a strange expression. "I'm Diem, your girlfriend," she whispered, her voice filled with pain. "Don't you remember me?" Toan stared at her for a while, his eyes sparkling with confusion, but in the end, he just shook his head softly. "I'm sorry. I don't remember anything. I don't know who you are, but it feels like we've met somewhere before." Diem didn't know what to say. The pain in her heart grew deeper. She could only stand there, unable to hold back her emotions. She knew Toan had lost his memory, but hearing him say those words felt like her world was falling apart. "I'll help you find the memories you've lost, Toan," she promised, tears falling down her face. But in her heart, there was still hope. She knew that no matter how hard it would be, she would never give up. Toan looked at her once more, his eyes still full of uncertainty. He nodded gently, as if wanting to believe her words. But would he ever remember everything? And would he ever be the man she once loved again? The market was still bustling, but for Diem, everything around her now felt silent, as if time had stopped. She stood there watching as Toan left with the elderly woman. The feeling of loss surged inside her, making the vendors' shouts and the conversations of the people sound like distant muffled noises. She couldn't take her eyes off Toan's figure, even though he hadn't recognized her, even though he didn't remember anything about their past together. Diem tried to take a deep breath, wiping away the tears that streamed down her cheeks, but she couldn't hold back the pain inside. She never expected their reunion to be so heartbreaking. He didn't remember her, their love, or anything they had built together. Toan had changed so much. The confidence, the decisiveness, the bright spark in his eyes that she once loved, now all of it seemed blurred, aimless. He was like a stranger, not the man she once loved, not the man she had given her heart and hope to. She remembered the moments they shared, the peaceful mornings, the long, endless conversations. But now all those things seemed to have vanished from his memory. The elderly woman walked beside Toan, small but patient, as if she were the only one who could help him in this situation. She wondered if the woman knew who Toan was before he lost his memory, if she had been the one to care for him all this time. An overwhelming sense of unease took over Diem, but she couldn't just walk away and do nothing. She decided to step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to know more about Toan. She needed to understand why he had become like this. As she walked down the street, she happened to see the elderly woman standing at a corner of the market, talking to a familiar vendor. She decided to approach. "Hello," Diem called out, walking closer. The elderly woman turned around, her expression gentle, though she seemed a little surprised to see her. "Ah, you're the one who's been looking for Toan, aren't you?" the elderly woman asked softly. Diem nodded, not knowing what else to say. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Could you tell me about Toan? I don't understand why he's like this. He doesn't remember me or everything we went through." The elderly woman looked at her, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Toan has lost his memory, dear. I've been taking care of him since he got hurt, and now he's not the Toan you once knew." Her voice revealed a clear sense of worry. "He doesn't remember me?" Diem asked, her eyes filled with tears. It felt like the whole world was collapsing around her. The elderly woman sighed, her face filled with compassion. "It's not just you. Toan doesn't remember many things. He's not the person you once loved. But I don't know how he lost his memory. I only know that I have to take care of him." Diem felt a deep pain as she heard the woman's words. She had hoped so much that Toan would remember, but now all that hope seemed to have vanished in an instant. She didn't know what to do anymore. The memories of Toan, of their love, were now just faint traces in her mind, while Toan still didn't remember anything about her. The elderly woman continued, "You know there are things we can't change. Toan has changed, and all I can do is take care of him. You're the only one who can help him, but you'll have to be patient." Diem felt a flicker of hope in the woman's words. She knew she couldn't give up no matter how difficult it was. She wouldn't abandon Toan. He needed her, even if he couldn't remember that. "Thank you for telling me," Diem said, her tears still falling. "I won't give up. I'll help him no matter what." The elderly woman smiled softly, her eyes shining just a little, as if she understood the determination in Diem's heart. "I'm sure Toan will remember one day. Keep trying." Diem stood there for a while, after talking to the elderly woman, her mind in a whirlwind. She wanted to go back to Toan, but the truth was, he didn't remember anything about their past. A sense of hopelessness overwhelmed her, but a part of her heart wouldn't let her give up. Toan was the man she loved, and no matter what, she wouldn't quit. She had to help him find his memories, no matter how many challenges she had to face. She walked toward the corner of the market, where Toan and the elderly woman had just left. The market was still crowded with stalls, piled high with fruits, vegetables, fresh fish, and snacks. The voices of the vendors, the laughter of shoppers all blended together to create the noisy, lively atmosphere of the market. But for Diem, all those sounds now felt distant. All her thoughts were focused on Toan. As she walked down the main street of the market, Diem suddenly spotted a familiar figure standing next to a fruit stall. The man, who seemed to be inspecting a watermelon, looked strange and unfamiliar. She felt a little anxiety in her chest and couldn't tear her eyes away from him. Just a moment later, she realized it was Toan. There he stood, his hair messy, his face tired, and his expression unfamiliar. No longer did he have the determined look she once loved. Instead, there was a haze, as if he didn't know where he was or what he was doing. He was still Toan, but he wasn't the Toan she remembered. Every step he took, every movement he made, brought a sharp pain to Diem's heart, because she knew he no longer remembered her, no longer remembered their love. Diem couldn't stand still any longer. She hurried toward Toan, her heart pounding in her chest, each step heavy with the weight of her emotions. She couldn't hesitate for another second. Even though she knew this meeting wouldn't be like the others, she couldn't let the opportunity slip by. She wanted him to remember, no matter how hard it was. She wouldn't give up. As she got closer, Toan looked up at her, his eyes filled with confusion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hesitant and strange. Diem froze in place at his question, her heart breaking. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Toan didn't recognize her. She had waited for so long, but now Toan looked at her with such a strange gaze. "I'm Diem Toan," she said softly, barely believing her own words. "Don't you remember me? We were in love. You were the one I loved most." Toan didn't respond, only staring at her with a look of utter confusion. She could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He couldn't remember. Her couldn't remember the days they spent together. She felt a lump in her throat, but she was determined not to let the tears fall. Diem, right," Toan mumbled, as if trying to find something familiar in those words. But then he shook his head. I don't remember anything. I don't know who you are, but I feel like we've met before, but I just can't remember." Diem stood still, unsure of what to say next. She could only stand there looking at him with a heart full of pain. A part of her wanted to run to him to whisper in his ear that she was his love that he would remember someday. But she knew she couldn't. He didn't remember, and she couldn't force him to. The elderly woman who she had met earlier stood at a distance watching the conversation between her and Toan. Her gaze was filled with concern, as if she knew something that Diem didn't. When she saw Diem standing still, the elderly woman walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You shouldn't push him," the elderly woman said, her voice low. "Toan can't remember right away. He needs time." Diem turned to look at the elderly woman, her eyes filled with tears. "But Grandma, I can't take it anymore. He's Toan, the one I love, but now he doesn't remember me. How can I let him live like this?" The elderly woman looked at Diem with compassionate eyes. "I know you're heartbroken, but sometimes there's nothing we can do but be patient. Toan is trying, and he'll need you by his side when he remembers. But don't force him. Let him find himself." Diem took a deep breath and nodded. "I understand, but I won't give up. I'll be here waiting for him to remember." Diem stood quietly, her eyes never leaving Toan as he turned and walked away with the elderly woman. A lump of emotion rose in her chest, as if every step Toan took was like a knife cutting into her heart. He walked further away, but her gaze couldn't leave his back. She had waited so long for this moment, and now standing before her was a man who seemed like a complete stranger. She couldn't believe this was Toan, the man she once loved, the one who had shared so many sweet memories with her over the years. The market was still crowded with the vendors calling out, people bargaining, and laughter filling the air. But to Diem, all those sounds felt like something distant, meaningless. She felt like she was lost in a world where Toan no longer existed, where he wasn't the person she once knew. He had lost everything, and she was slowly losing the man she loved. She took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and tried to hold back her emotions. Diem couldn't let herself fall apart. She had to keep going. Toan was still alive, and he just needed time to remember everything. But would time be enough? Could he regain his memories before it was too late? The elderly woman stopped, turned and looked at Diem with understanding in her eyes. She gave a small nod, not saying anything, but her expression held deep sympathy. "Do you want to come with us?" she asked softly. Diem didn't answer immediately, standing there feeling a sense of confusion in her heart. She wanted to go with them, but she didn't know if it was the right thing to do. If she went with them, would Toan remember? Would he feel her presence and the love they had shared? Or would he just look at her like a stranger? Just like he had when he looked at her earlier, the elderly woman spoke again, breaking the silence. "Toan can't remember everything right away. He needs time. If you really love him, you have to be patient. Don't make him feel pressured." Diem nodded, understanding that the elderly woman was right. But in her heart, an unease lingered. Could she wait long enough for him? Could she help him remember before it was too late? The elderly woman started walking toward a small house nearby where Toan was living. Diem followed behind, her heart filled with questions that had no answers. Each step felt heavy, but she couldn't give up. Couldn't walk away from Toan, even though he didn't remember her. When they reached the small house, the elderly woman opened the door and entered first. Toan was sitting in the corner of the room, staring out the window, where the last rays of sunlight shone through the trees. The outside world looked so beautiful, but Toan didn't seem to care. He just stared into the emptiness, as if everything around him no longer mattered. Diem stood in the doorway looking at his back. The memories of their time together rushed back, making her heart ache. Toan? He was still the man she loved, but he was so distant, no longer remembering her. The elderly woman spoke softly. Toan, you have a visitor. Toan turned around his eyes, blank, not recognizing her. Who is she? He asked, his voice still strange, lacking any familiarity. Diem stepped toward him, her heart breaking. She wanted to speak, to shout that she was the one who loved him, that they had shared a wonderful past, but all she could do was softly say, "Don't you remember me, Toan? I'm Diem, your girlfriend." Toan looked at her, confusion slowly creeping across his face. I don't remember anything. I'm sorry, I can't remember," he said, his voice hesitant. Diem didn't know what to do other than stand still, feeling an overwhelming sadness. She looked into his eyes, but she couldn't find any familiarity. All that was left were empty spaces, fragmented memories that she couldn't piece together. The elderly woman stood by, watching them for a long moment before speaking. "Don't be too discouraged, Diem. Toan will remember, but he needs time. You have to be patient. Help him find his memories." Diem looked at Toan, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll stay. I won't give up. Even if he doesn't remember, I'll still be by his side." Toan looked at her, his eyes still unclear, but there was no resistance. He didn't fully understand what she was saying, but maybe somehow a part of him felt the familiarity from Diem. Maybe one day he would remember. Maybe one day everything would come back to the way it was. Diem stood still, her eyes not leaving Toan's back as he walked slowly with the elderly woman toward the narrow alley leading to the house where they were living. The lump in her chest made each step feel heavier. Toan, the man she loved now, didn't remember. Didn't remember anything about their past. Still deep inside her heart, she knew she couldn't give up. She wouldn't lose hope, no matter what Toan was like. The market remained bustling, but to Diem, everything felt like a blur. The calls of the vendors, the chatter of shoppers, all became distant. She couldn't escape the thoughts of Toan. Everything seemed to spin in her mind. She didn't know what to do next, but she knew she couldn't just leave without finding answers to the questions left unanswered. She watched Toan's back, her heart breaking piece by piece as he didn't recognize her. This was the first time they had met after so many long days of waiting. But it was a painful encounter. Every step he took, every gesture of his, was so unlike the man she once loved, the man she had deeply cared for. The elderly woman walked slowly, as if not wanting to put pressure on Toan. Diem couldn't hold back her emotions any longer. She rushed to follow, but her feet felt like they were glued to the ground. She wanted to get closer to tell Toan that she was still here, but she couldn't find a way to make him remember. All this time, she had believed that love could overcome any obstacle, but now she had to face the heartbreaking reality: Toan didn't remember her. When they reached the small house, Diem decided not to go inside. She stopped at the gate, looking in with pain in her eyes. The house was simple, a small space with faded walls, and inside, Toan was still sitting there, not even acknowledging her presence. The sight made her heart ache. Diem turned to look at the elderly woman, her resolve growing stronger. She couldn't stand by and watch Toan live a life where he no longer remembered who he was. "Could you tell me how long he's been here?" Diem asked, her voice gentle but full of determination. The elderly woman looked at her. Her eyes filled with compassion, yet also showing clear resolve. Toan has been here for about 3 months. When he arrived, I took care of him, gave him meals, and had him do small chores in the garden. But his memory can't come back quickly. That's what I'm afraid of. Diem nodded, her eyes fixed on the house where Toan sat, a man who had lost all memory of the past. Do you think he'll remember? She asked, unable to hide the worry in her voice. The elderly woman sighed, her eyes looking far off, as if searching for an answer in distant memories. What I know is that Toan will need a lot of time, but the important thing is that you need to be there for him. Only your love will help him regain his memories. Diem felt a small flicker of hope in the woman's words, though she wasn't sure if she had the patience to wait. But she couldn't give up on Toan, couldn't let him live in this fog forever. She would stay no matter how long it took. Thank you, Diem said, offering a faint smile, trying to hold herself together. I won't give up. I'll help him remember. The cold silence settled around them as the elderly woman and Diem stood outside, neither saying another word. Diem knew that her journey wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't give up because she believed that love was the greatest power that could help Toan regain his memories and become himself again. The next day, Diem decided she would not leave Toan again. She couldn't bear to let him stay alone, unable to remember anything about their past or the people who loved him the most. The elderly woman had been right. Toan would need time, and she had to be the one to stay by his side throughout that time. The morning after she returned to Toan's small house, he was sitting in the old chair in the living room, still staring out the window, but there was no sign that he was aware of the world around him. Gone was the confident, strong CEO she once knew. Now, he was just a man with no memory, living in a foggy world, unaware of anything. Diem stepped inside her heart, feeling unfamiliar and heavy. However, she remained resolute, refusing to let the pain and hopelessness overwhelm her. She walked over to him, gently sat down beside him, and looked into his eyes. Toan, do you know? She started, her voice soft but full of determination. I've been searching for you for so long. Even though you don't remember me, I can't give up. I will be here helping you remember everything. Toan looked at her, but there was no recognition in his eyes. He just nodded as if he heard her, but didn't fully understand what she was saying. Thank you, he said, his voice distant. But I don't know who I am. I don't know what I've done or why I'm here. Diem felt a lump in her throat as she heard his words. She couldn't do anything but sit there, struggling to control her emotions. She knew forcing Toan to remember too quickly would only make him more stressed. He needed time, and she had to be patient. No matter how many days passed, she would stay by his side, helping him find himself. Diem gently took Toan's hand, feeling its coldness. You don't have to remember right away, but I just need you to know that I will always be here with you. Those words were not what she had said to Toan before, but now they were a promise, a reminder to herself. She wouldn't give up on him, even if he forgot everything. She would be the one to stand by him. In the days that followed, life for Toan and Diem began to feel more familiar. Every morning, Diem and the elderly woman would go out into the garden to harvest vegetables and tend to the plants. Toan still helped with the farm work, but everything felt new to him, as though he had never done these things before. He didn't remember that he had once been a CEO, didn't remember his busy, powerful life. All he knew was that every day he woke up, had breakfast, and worked alongside Diem and the elderly woman. The farm work wasn't complicated, but it brought Toan a sense of peace. He gradually adapted to this new life. Even though he couldn't remember his past, he could still find joy in these simple tasks. But every time he looked at Diem, there was something strangely familiar. He didn't understand why, but her gaze always made him feel warm, as though there was a connection between them that he couldn't remember. Diem, meanwhile, held on to the belief that Toan would regain his memory. She didn't let the pain take over, always wearing a smile, even though her heart was filled with worry. Every day she spent time talking to him, sharing their beautiful memories, the places they had been, the unforgettable moments. She wanted him to remember, even if it was just a small part. Do you remember? We once traveled to some beautiful beaches, and you always wanted to take me there again, Diem said as they rested under a tree. You said that every time you saw the ocean, you felt free. You said that's where we would live forever. Toan was silent, his eyes showing no emotion. Still, Diem continued, not letting the silence stop her. She didn't stop hoping. She believed that one day Toan would remember everything. She knew that even if he didn't remember her, a part of him still felt the love they had shared. Every time she saw him working in the garden, every time he smiled shyly, she could sense a bond, fragile but still there. Even though his memory hadn't returned, the feelings they shared couldn't easily disappear. Diem decided that she wouldn't just help him remember, she would also give him a reason to keep living. She wanted him to know that even if his memories faded, love would always remain. It would be the only thing left between them. One day, as they sat resting under the tree, Diem looked at Toan and asked, "Do you ever feel like something's missing? Like there's a part of you that you can't remember?" Toan looked at her, his eyes distant. "Yes, sometimes I feel like I've missed something important, but I can't remember what it is." "Do you think I'll remember everything?" Diem smiled softly, feeling a little comforted. "One day you'll remember, Toan. I believe that." Diem couldn't stop. She felt like she had found an important piece of the complex puzzle of Toan. The stories about his family, his mother, and the changes in his life, they all pointed to one thing. Toan's memory loss might not be by chance. There could be a deeper reason, an event, or a situation that he couldn't remember, but she wouldn't give up on helping him find it all. She decided to meet Toan's close friends, former colleagues, and even those who had worked with him. She hoped they could provide more insight into what had happened before Toan lost his memory. One of Toan's longtime friends, Dewey, who had worked with Toan at the company, agreed to meet her. They met at a small cafe by the road, a place where Toan and Dewey used to visit frequently after work. Diem could sense the worry in Dewey's eyes when he looked at her, as if he knew something but was hesitant to speak. Diem, "I know you're looking for Toan, but there are things I can't fully explain." Toan got involved in a very complicated situation before he disappeared. Dewey began, his voice lowering. Diem couldn't hold back her worry. What situation was he in danger? Dewey looked around, making sure no one was listening before continuing. "I can't tell you everything, but I can say that some people didn't want Toan to continue down the path he was on. Some unhealthy business relationships led him into situations he couldn't control. And I think that's why he changed and eventually disappeared." Diem felt her heart heavy. things were becoming more complicated. It wasn't just about Toan's memory loss, but also a web of dangerous relationships he may have gotten tangled in. What was she supposed to do to solve all of this? How could she bring Toan back? Diem knew her journey had just begun. She wouldn't give up on Toan, even if he didn't remember her, even if his memories were lost. She would do everything she could to help him find himself. But would she be strong enough to face the secrets behind Toan's disappearance and the dangerous relationships he had become involved in? The answer was still unclear, but one thing was certain: Diem would never give up, no matter how many challenges lay ahead. The scene ended as Diem walked back to the small house where Toan was waiting. Though her heart was heavy with worry, she kept moving forward because she believed that one day Toan would remember everything and they would get through these difficult times together.